A changeling, also historically referred to as an elf or oaf, is a human-like creature found in folklore throughout Europe. A changeling was believed to be a fairy that had been left in place of a human, typically a child, stolen by other fairies. A changeling is typically identifiable via a number of traits. In Irish legend, a fairy child may appear sickly and will not grow in size like a normal child, and may have notable physical characteristics such as a beard or long teeth. They may also display intelligence far beyond their apparent years, as well as possess uncanny insight. A common way that a changeling could identify itself is through displaying unusual behavior when it thinks it is alone, such as jumping about, dancing or playing an instrument, though this last example is found only within Irish and Scottish legend. 1. A human child might be taken due to many factors, to act as a servant, the love of a human child, or malice. 2. Most often it was thought that fairies exchanged the children. In rare cases, the very elderly of the fairy people would be exchanged in the place of a human baby, so that the old fairy could live in comfort, being coddled by its human parents. 3. Simple charms such as an inverted coat or open iron scissors left where the child sleeps, were thought to ward them off. Other measures included a constant watch over the child. 4. Folklorist D. L. Ashlyman proposes in his essay Changelings that changeling tales illustrate an aspect of family survival in pre-industrial Europe. A peasant family's subsistence frequently depended upon the productive labor of each member, and it was difficult to provide for a person who was a permanent drain on the family's scarce resources. The fact that the changeling's ravenous appetite is so frequently mentioned indicates that the parents of these unfortunate children saw in their continuing existence a threat to the sustenance of the entire family. Changeling tales support other historical evidence in suggesting that infanticide was frequently the solution selected. 4. Fairies would also take adult humans, especially the newly married and new mothers. Young adults were taken to marry fairies instead, while new mothers were often taken to nurse fairy babies. Often when an adult was taken instead of a child, an object such as a log was left in place of the stolen human, enchanted to look like the person. 5. This object in place of the human would seem to sicken and die, to be buried by the human family, while the living human was among the fairies. Bridget Cleary is one of the most well-known cases of an adult thought to be a changeling by her family. Her husband killed her attempting to force the fairies to return his real wife. In medieval Scandinavia, it was believed that trolls considered it more respectable to be raised by humans than by their own kind, and would consequently seize the opportunity to give their own children a human upbringing. Some believed that trolls would only take unbaptized children 6-7, since once a child had been baptized and therefore received into the Catholic faith, the trolls were powerless to abduct it. Beauty in human children and young women, particularly traits which evoke brightness or reflectivity, such as blonde hair and blue or silver eyes, are said to attract fairies, as they perhaps find preciousness in these traits. 8. In Scottish folklore, the children might be replacements for fairy children in the Tithe to Hell. 9. This is best known from the Ballad of Tam Lin. 10. According to common Scottish myths, a child born with a caul, part of the amniotic membrane, across their face is a changeling, and will soon die, is of fey birth. Other folklore 3 says that human milk is necessary for fairy children to survive. In these cases, either the newborn human child would be switched with a fairy baby to be suckled by the human mother, or the human mother would be taken back to the fairy world to breastfeed the fairy babies. It is also thought that human midwives were necessary to bring fairy babies into the world. Some stories tell of changelings who forget they are not human and proceed to live a human life. Changelings who do not forget, however, in some stories return to their fairy family, possibly leaving the human family without warning. The human child that was taken may often stay with the fairy family forever. Feeling connected to the fate of a changeling, there are families who merely turn their changeling loose to the wilderness. Some folklorists believe that fairies were memories of inhabitants of various regions in Europe who had been driven into hiding by invaders. They held that changelings had actually occurred. The hiding people would exchange their own sickly children for the healthy children of the occupying invader. The Menontoll stones in Cornwall are said to have a fairy or pixie guardian who can make miraculous cures. In one case, a changeling baby was passed through the stone in order for the mother to have her real child returned to her. Evil pixies had changed her child, and the stones were able to reverse their spell. In Germany, the changeling is known as Wechselbalg 13 Wechsel kind 14 Kehlkopf or Dickkopf, the last both hinting at the huge necks and heads of changelings. 13. Several methods are known in Germany to identify a changeling and to return the replaced real child. Confusing the changeling by cooking or brewing in eggshells. This will force the changeling to speak, claiming its real age, revealing its position beyond synchronicity. 13. Attempting to heat the changeling in the oven. 15. Perhaps a lie by capacity to endure present. Hitting 15 or whipping 14 the changeling. Sometimes the changeling has to be fed with a woman's milk before replacing the children. 14. In German folklore, several possible parents are known for changelings. Those are the devil 13, a belief shared by Martin Luther IV who advocated for killing changelings. 16. A female dwarf. 15. A water spirit. 17. A Roggenmum/Roggenmutter, Rye Aunt/Rye Mother, a demonic woman living in cornfields and stealing human children. In Ireland, looking at a baby with envy overlooking the baby was dangerous, as it endangered the baby, who was then in the fairy's power. 19. So too was admiring or envying a woman or man dangerous, unless the person added a blessing, the able-bodied and beautiful were in particular danger. Women were especially in danger in liminal states, being a new bride, or a new mother. 20. Putting a changeling in a fire would cause it to jump up the chimney and return the human child, but at least one tale recounts a mother with a changeling finding that a fairy woman came to her home with the human child, saying the other fairies had done the exchange, and she wanted her own baby. 19. The tale of surprising a changeling into speech by brewing eggshells is also told in Ireland, as in Wales. 21. Various legends describe other ways to foil a would-be fairy kidnapper. One was to shout Garamagus Koisrasim Thursday, I bless you, or God bless you, which would cause the fairy to abandon the child it was trying to steal. Another possible tactic was to insert oneself into an argument over who would keep the child. Shouting out give it to me would trick the fairy into releasing the child back to a human. 1. Changelings, in some instances, were regarded not as substituted fairy children but instead old fairies brought to the human world to die. Irish legends regarding changelings typically follow the same formula. A tailor is the one who first notices a changeling, the inclusion of a fairy playing bagpipes or some other instrument, and the kidnapping of a human child through a window. 1. The modern Irish girl's name, Siofra, means an elvish or changeling child, deriving from Siabitra, meaning fairy, /fairies. The Aus Si, Siabitra, commonly anglicized as Shivra, may be prone to evil and mischief. 22-23. However, the Ulster folk song The Garden Mother's Lullaby also uses Shivra simply to mean spirit or fairy. The Isle of Man had a wide collection of myths and superstitions concerning fairies, and there are numerous folk tales that have been collected concerning supposed changelings. Sophia Morrison, in her Manx Fairy Tales, David Nutt, London, 1911, includes the tale of the fairy child of Close, New York. Lahey, a tale of a child supposedly swapped by the fairies for a loud and unruly fairy child. The English poet and topographer George Waldron, who lived in the Isle of Man during the early 18th century, cites a tale of a reputed changeling that was shown to him, possibly a child with an inherited genetic disorder. Nothing under heaven could have a more beautiful face, but though between 5 and 6 years old, and seemingly healthy, he was so far from being able to walk, or stand, that he could not so much as move any one joint. His limbs were vastly long for his age, but smaller than an infant's of 6 months, his complexion was perfectly delicate, and he had the finest hair in the world. He never spoke, nor cried, ate scarcely anything, and was very seldom seen to smile, but if anyone called him a fairy elf, he would frown and fix his eyes so earnestly on those who said it, as if he would look them through. His mother, or at least his supposed mother, being very poor, frequently went out a-charing, and left him a whole day together. The neighbors, out of curiosity, have often looked in at the window to see how he behaved when alone, which, whenever they did, they were sure to find him laughing and in the utmost delight. This made them judge that he was not without company more pleasing to him than any mortals could be, and what made this conjecture seem the more reasonable was, that if he were left ever so dirty, the woman at her return saw him with a clean face, and his hair combed with the utmost exactness and nicety. In the Anglo-Scottish border region it was believed that elves, or fairies, lived in elf hills, or fairy hills. Along with this belief in supernatural beings was the view that they could spirit away children, and even adults, and take them back to their own world, see Alchemy 25-26. Often, it was thought, a baby would be snatched and replaced with a simulation of the baby, usually a male adult elf, to be suckled by the mother. 25. The real baby would be treated well by the elves and would grow up to be one of them, whereas the changeling baby would be discontented and wearisome. 26. Many herbs, salves and seeds could be used for discovering the fairy folk and ward off their designs. 26. It was also believed that, in order to force a changeling to reveal itself, it must either be surprised into speech or made to laugh. 27. In one tale a mother suspected that her baby had been taken and replaced with a changeling, a view that was proven to be correct one day when a neighbor ran into the house shouting, "Come here and yell, see a sight. Yonder's the fairy hill aloe, i.e. the fairy hill is on fire." To this, the elf got up, saying, "Ways me. Wad'll come o me wife and bairns," and made his way out of the chimney. 25. At Byreholm near Newcastleton in Liddesdale sometime during the early 19th century, a dwarf called Robert Elliot, or Little Hobby o' the Castleton as he was known, was reputed to be a changeling. When taunted by other boys he would not hesitate to draw his gully, a large knife, and dispatch them. However, being that he was woefully short in the legs, they usually outran him and escaped. However, he was courageous, and when he heard that his neighbour, the 6 foot 3 inch, 191 centimeters, William Scott of Kerndean, a sturdy and strong borderer, had slandered his name, he invited the man to his house, took him up the stairs and challenged him to a duel. Scott beat a hasty retreat. 26. Child Ballad 40, The Queen of Elfland's Nurse, depicts the abduction of a new mother, drawing on the folklore of the changelings. Although it is fragmentary, it contains the mother's grief and the Queen of Elfland's promise to return her to her own child if she will nurse the Queen's child until it can walk. The Mamuna or Boginki 29 is a Slavic spirit that exchanges babies, making them into odmiants, in the cradle. The changelings left by the Mamuna were said to have a noticeably different appearance, an abnormally large abdomen, unusually small or large head, a hump, thin arms and legs, a hairy body, and long claws. Mamuna changelings would also get their first set of teeth prematurely compared to a human baby. 30. In order to protect a child from being kidnapped by the Mamuna, the mother would tie a red ribbon around the baby's wrist, put a red hat on its head, and keep it out of the moonlight. Other preventative methods included not washing diapers after sunset and never turning their head away from the baby as it slept. 30. Still, even if a child was taken by the Mamuna, there was a way to force her to return it. The mother would take the changeling child to a midden, whip it with a birch stick, and pour water from an eggshell over it, all while shouting, "Take yours, give mine back." Typically, the Mamuna would feel sorry for its own child and would return the human baby to its mother. In Nordic traditional belief, it was generally believed that it was trolls or beings from the subterranean realms that exchanged children. Since most of the supernatural beings of Scandinavian folklore are said to be afraid of iron, Scandinavian parents would often place an iron tool such as a pair of scissors or a knife on top of the cradle of an unbaptized infant to prevent its being abducted by the trolls. It was believed that if a human child were still taken, in spite of such measures, the parents could force the return of the child by treating the changeling cruelly, using methods such as whipping or even inserting it in a heated oven. In at least one case, a woman was taken to court for having killed her child in an oven. 31. In Sweden, it was believed that a fire must be kept lit in the room housing a child before it is christened, and furthermore, that the water used to bathe the child should not be thrown out. since both of these precautions will prevent the child from being taken by trolls.